Okay, so my name is Rachel. I work here at LEF as I'm very young. I'm not 14, although I look like it. And I'm here I do a 2-year project representing survivors of domestic violence in consumer legal issues. Oh, thank you. Sorry. So I'm also new to the world of DV. And I've spent, the past year trying to learn a lot about it. And so some of this is just kind of like my perspective and about doing this kind of work. I think you can take that with a grain of salt. And then some of it is actually really helpful facts that I think can be very powerful in terms of communicating this information to the people that you're working with and making them feel like they have choice and they have some power in a situation, which often means that they don't. Is this a recorder or a thingy? Okay. How do I?
On the podium.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I just need to stand over here so I can see what's going on. Okay, so we have 3 goals today. One is to talk about prioritizing bills and debts. The other one, and important to understanding which bills and debts you should pay first, is understanding how bills are collected. And then if we have time, we can also talk about ordering and reading credit reports, because that also can relate to understanding how debts are collected and kind of strategizing over which bills and debts that you should be you should be talking to your clients about paying. So the first thing is, what do you think of when you hear the word money? Anybody? Huh?
I don't earn enough.
And don't have enough. Yes. What do you think?
I don't earn enough.
Huh?
I don't earn enough.
You don't earn enough. That's, yeah, I feel you there. Anybody else? Are ideas when you think of the word money? What do you think about people who have money? They're blessed. They also have power, right? Like, you think having money gives you power, gives you choices. And so that's, I think, something to think about when you're working with people who are survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence is all about exerting power and control over another person. And if you are working with somebody to give them information about money and give them information about finances, it can be one way to take back control and have power. Although I want to be very clear, that is not a golden ticket to solving all of that. But it can be one way to helping someone feel like they do have choice and they do have power. When have you ever felt powerful with regard to money?
When I got my income tax.
When you got your income tax, yeah, and you're like, look, I paid all my taxes, now I get my nice refund. I think for me, like getting my first paycheck as like a real working adult, I was like, yeah, I did this, or paying off a debt. Anybody have other ideas? Okay, yeah. So I think, right, like we can also, even if you don't have enough or don't have very much, working with money and feeling like you have information about money is another way to feel powerful. The other thing, and this is kind of my 2 cents part about this, is that I like to approach this issue from an asset-based perspective, and that's from learning and talking to a lot of people who spend a lot more time in this than I have. And it's something I struggle with every single day. But I think when we're faced with someone in crisis, we tend to focus on the problems and the needs that they're presenting. And I would invite you to ask yourself, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what does the survivor bring to the table? And we have our first little scenario about this. And this is particularly in terms of money and debt. So for sake of time, I'm going to talk. Susie is maybe somebody who's come in to work with you. She's living in a shelter. She's working part-time. She's a survivor of DV. She's looking for long-term housing. She has a good community of friends here in Chicago, but she's not making enough money right now to afford rent every month. She has no idea what her credit report contains, but she thinks that it is probably not good. So Susie has some real problems, some real issues that she's facing, but what are some of the things that Susie is bringing to the table that you could... Sorry?
She has a job.
Yeah, she has a job. She's a source of income. That's really nice. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, right now she doesn't have pay rent. She has some housing. I heard support system, right? She has this community of friends that might be a good connection to a job or to more long-term housing. So yeah, steady income, part-time work, needs time to look, friends, a place to move in, or a possible roommate. She also has some needs. What are some of the needs that Susie has?
Long-term housing.
Long-term housing, yeah. long-term housing, more income.
Probably clean up her credit.
Yeah, and help cleaning up her credit. So you guys must be experts in this because you're already getting all of it. So just sometimes when I have just done an intake with someone and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much. It feels like there's a lot weighing on your shoulders and a lot weighing on the person that you're working with shoulders. So sometimes I like to just take a deep breath, and especially when it comes to money and debt, think about what this person is bringing to the table. Okay, so why does money matter anyway? What do we need it for?
To survive.
To survive, yes. That's kind of a silly question, but it's, I think, helpful to think about, what are the basic things that we need it for, right? We need it for housing, we need it for food, we need it for transportation. So one of the things that I start with is 2 framing questions. One of which is, what are the survivors' goals? What are they trying to get to? And the second is, how do the consumer issues that they're facing right now help or hinder them achieving those goals? Okay? And one of the big things why I like that, why does the money matter, is it helps us think about how to prioritize what someone might be spending their money on. Food, housing, and transportation and shelter, I would say, are always the most important things. So when I'm working with someone and they have $1,000 coming in and $1,500 of costs every month, this is what I advise them strongly, that they should be focusing to pay these bills first, right? Always rent and mortgage first, then food, then utilities, then secured debts, and we're going to define that term in just a second, and then unsecured debts, okay? And with the caveat that sometimes people have different priorities, right? This car is very important to them, it gives them a sense of freedom, and we should respect those choices, but generally speaking, this is the list. Okay, so you notice that secured debt came before unsecured debt. Have you guys ever heard the term secured debt versus unsecured debt before? Okay, so I'm just going to go over it kind of quickly. Secured debt means that the creditor has an interest in the piece of property. So if you don't pay, the creditor, without going to court most of the time, except for foreclosures, can go get that piece of property and take it back, okay? And the big one is foreclosure on your house. They do have to go to court for that, and repossession of the car. Unsecured debt means the creditor does not have an interest in a piece of property, and that's like your credit card and a payday loan. Okay, so a good thing to be like, okay, I'm trying to help this person work through, should they pay this credit card or should they pay this installment loan on their furniture? Ask yourself, does the creditor have a right to some piece of property? If they do, then it is a secured debt. Another really good example of a secured debt, even if you don't have a car note but somebody took out a title loan, they can go and take the car if they are late on the title loan. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Another important caveat here is that there are such things as voluntary wage assignments. And that is where kind of some of the, I would say, less fair or less beneficial credit services, they might really pressure somebody to sign a voluntary wage assignment. You see it a lot with payday loans. And that's where someone says, yes, I give you permission to take money out of my wages every month or every 2 weeks, okay? That is not a secured debt. You can, in writing, send a revocation to the creditor and say, I no longer want you to take money right out of my wages every single month, and they have to honor that. Okay, you have to do it in writing, and there's usually some address in the contract that you can send it to. So somebody might be like, well, they take money out of my paycheck every month for that, and you want to kind of push a little further. Well, is that a garnishment, or did you tell them that you could do that they could do that? Because that is not a secured debt. So then we kind of ask ourselves, how are debts collected? And this is important to the reason that I'm saying unsecured debts should be the lowest priority, because it's important to understand what the repercussions are if you don't make a payment, right? If you don't make a payment, how are debts collected? Voluntary payment. So if you just say, okay, Mr. Creditor, I'm, sending you a check every month for $100, they are collecting on their debt, they're collecting on that loan or whatever, and you are doing that voluntarily, and that voluntary wage assignment is an example of voluntary payment. If it's a secured debt and you stop paying, they go and they take that piece of property. They go and take the car, they go and take the furniture, they go and file a foreclosure lawsuit. So that's how they collect it if it's a secured debt. But if it is unsecured, they have to file a lawsuit, get a judgment in that lawsuit, which means they need to get service, and then enforce the judgment. So that takes a lot of time and money to do all of those things. And that is why it's important to understand maybe the creditor might not want to expend all of that time and energy in order to collect the debt. And to understand that really the only way that an unsecured creditor can get money from your client is to either file a lawsuit or have the client give it to them voluntarily. All right, those are the only two ways that it can happen. So filing a lawsuit is expensive. There are fees to do that. The creditor has to pay those fees. And because of that, many original creditors, the person that your client signed the contract with, right, will sell the debt. They will sell that account to another company. That company is called debt buyer. You might recognize the names Midland Funding, Asset Acceptance, Portfolio Recovery Services, That's generally who's suing on these kinds of debts, all right? Or they'll hire another company to collect the debt. They won't actually sell the account, but they'll just have this other company who will call all the time and say, you need to pay me, you need to pay, you need to pay, okay? These people are called debt buyers and debt collectors. There are more protections for your client against these debt buyers and these debt collectors than there are against original creditors. There's some powerful federal law and there's some good state law as well. So it's important to understand that may be who is communicating with your client, and that your client has power, your client has protections in communications with these types of organizations. And that original creditors, because it is expensive to try and get that money themselves, oftentimes they will sell the account to the debt buyers and the debt collectors. So to kind of wrap that up, secured debts over unsecured debts all the time, because you want to keep the things that you have, and survival over credit. Because that's the big fear in everyone's mind. I think there's a very strong feeling like I pay my debts, right? That's something that's considered honorable, and I think that that's true. But most of the people that we're working with don't have the ability to pay everything. It's not a question of whether or not they want to, it's a question of whether or not they can. And so I think it's important to talk about that with your client and say, it is more important for you to be safe and stable than it is for you to honor, this particular idea that you pay your debts, or for you to protect your credit. Now, that's kind of a tricky thing, because your credit has a lot of repercussions. It helps you get your apartment with your landlords. But the other thing to understand about credit is that it changes. It will go up and down, throughout your life. That's why I have these nice waves to kind of show if at some point later in time your client has stable source of income and they are able to make their on-time payments, that will help them build their credit back up. So it is more important to pay for food and heat and housing than it is to pay on an unsecured debt because you're worried about your credit score. That's my opinion. I think that it's been borne out in a lot of the people that I work with, but I think, yeah. The other thing is that you have protections. You have protections against the creditors, even if they go and they file a lawsuit against you and they get service. You get something in the mail that says you have to come to court at this time. Let's say you don't go to court because it's very stressful to go to court, right? It's very, very stressful to go to court. And the creditor gets a judgment against you. There is some income and property that is protected against enforcement of that judgment, and these are called exemptions. And these are also really important to talk to somebody about when you're trying to decide, should I pay on this debt or not? Because it may be that all of their property and all of their income is protected. So let's talk about those. Protected income. Wages up to $371.25 a week, which is 40 times the Illinois minimum wage. So when the minimum wage changes, that changes too. But I think that's the correct number for right now. Okay, so you can make up to $371.25 a week gross, and nothing can be touched. If you make more than that, the most that can be garnished is 15% of your weekly gross pay. Okay? They cannot touch TANF, AABD, your earned income tax credit, your Social Security, including SSDI and SSI, if you get benefits through the VA, if you have workers' comp, if you have unemployment. They cannot touch your maintenance, and they cannot touch child support. The exact language for maintenance and child support is to support of their family and their dependents. Okay, but that's a standard. Of course, you always need that money to keep you supported. So if the person that you're working with, only sources of income come from these areas, even if there is a judgment against them, the creditor cannot take any of that money. All right? That's very, very important to know. There's also exemptions for property, personal property. All right? You get up to $4,000 in cash or value. So let's say that you have a bank account, and in this bank account, your client has been saving because they're trying to pay for a security deposit for a new apartment, and then they get some citation to discover assets from the creditor. They get something in the mail saying, you have to come to court and tell us how much money you have. Or they get something from their bank saying, oh, your bank account's been frozen. And that's really terrifying, and it really disrupts life. So what you can do is you should tell your client, go to court and tell them that you would like to claim your personal exemption. You can, up to $4,000 is protected in that bank account. They can't touch it, all right? Also very important, $2,400 of value in a car. Maybe you have a car that's worth $4,000. You can stack your wild card and your car exemption together to protect that entire car, okay? So, it is not incredibly common, but it is legally possible for a creditor to attach a judgment to a car, even if it's not the person that has the car loan. If it's the person that has the car loan, they'll always take the car. But let's just say it's a credit card company that you didn't pay. It is legally possible for them to attach the judgment to the car, but it is not common. But if your car is worth less than $6,400, they can't touch it. All right, that's protected. $1,500 in tools and implements of a trade. So that's not just like construction tools, which is what I think of, but maybe the person that you're working with is a beauty stylist. So everything that she or he is using, all of their like hairdressing tools, those are protected. Okay, and then necessary clothing, Bible, school books, family pictures, and health aids prescribed by a physician. That's also really important. All right, now we have another little scenario. We can go through it pretty quickly because we're running out of time, and I would like to talk about credit reports as well. But Lila is a mother of 2 minor children. She recently left her husband, who was physically and sexually abusing her. She and her children are living with her sister. She pays her sister $300 a month to help out with household bills, but knows she can't stay there forever. She has 2 credit cards that she pays about $50 a month on. One has a balance of $1,500, the other has a balance of $250. She's working cleaning houses and makes about $1,000 a month. This is a good job for her because the hours are flexible and she can be with her kids after school and on the weekends. She gets to work by driving a 2007 Kia Sorento. She spends the rest of her monthly income on gas, food, her cell phone bill, and the cell phone bill for her daughter. Auto insurance is in her husband's name, and she isn't sure whether he will continue paying the bill since she left. She has a medical bill from Stroger for about $2,000 from the most recent incident of abuse. Since winter is coming, Lila's sister wants her to pay about $400 a month, so $100 more, to cover the higher heating bill, and Lila is focused on keeping her kids in their current school. So what are some of the assets that Lila brings to the table, especially as it pertains to money and debt and financial stability? Yeah, she's got a really good job. She's got a car. Yeah. She has a place to stay.
A couple of credit cards.
She has a couple credit cards. Yeah, all of those things. And what are some of the issues that she's facing? What are some of the concerns that she might have, or that after you talk to her, you might be wanting to talk to her about these financial concerns?
Her bills. She's getting bills on her money, that money that she's earning.
Right.
She's getting into debt.
Yeah, she has these balances on her credit card bills. I didn't hear.
Auto insurance, she might have to pay.
Yeah, she's got to figure out what she's going to do with auto insurance because it's in her husband's name. Anybody else?
IRA.
Yeah, she's got to come up with an extra $100 soon.
She's got medical bill.
And she has this medical bill, yeah. So looking back, this is kind of tricky because we did it really fast, but what is some advice that you might give to her when you're thinking about like unsecured debt versus secured debt, or that kind of thing? What's some advice that you might give to Lila?
When you ask her if her credit cards are secured or unsecured?
Yeah, I think you would ask her, are your credit cards secured or unsecured? I would say 95% of the time most credit cards are unsecured. But it's still a good thing to ask. I saw one credit card once that was not. It was really weird. So if it's unsecured and she has to come up with an extra $100 a month, like maybe it's time to let that go, so she can pay her sister for her heating bill. Anything else? Other ideas?
Car insurance is important.
Yeah, car insurance is important. So maybe she can spend that $100 to get car insurance. I talked about this with a family law attorney, and they're like, well, we could address the car insurance in the divorce case, right? So it's important to remember that there's a lot of different relief and remedies that might be available in a different type of legal case. Oh, sorry. I didn't do this part. Okay. Advice. So she's got housing, she's got her credit cards, car insurance, her medical bill. Yes.
In terms of the medical bill, can't you potentially get that paid for?
Under crime victims?
Yeah.
Yeah. If she... Charity. Well, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, if it was happened from a crime and she reported it within 72 hours,
They'll
right?
require her to apply for charity.
Oh, okay. Well, Gloria knows. Yeah, okay. So she could do a charity care.
Last resort.
She might be eligible for Medicaid also.
Yeah, by the way, I didn't say it this morning, but Medicaid can get backdated 3 months. So even if the bill occurred 2 months ago, she could still apply for Medicaid and get it paid.
But she should also definitely apply for charity care. It's usually time a pretty easy application. And some of them, Stroger is one of them, they will put her on something called CareLink. Well, first of all, they might help her apply for Medicaid, but they will also put her on something called CareLink if she's not eligible for Medicaid. And that also gives some prospective help for about a year after you apply. So I think that's why I made it Stroger, so I could tell you guys about CareLink. Review her budget to see if she could find the extra $100 to go to rent a sister. And child support, right? I mean, he should be responsible for the care of the children. And, you can get, I'm sure they told you can get child support in an order of protection case or a divorce case, or a parentage case if they're unmarried. And apply for TANF. Yes. Yay. And apply for TANF. And she also might want to get a copy of her credit report. What?
She makes $1,000 a month,
Oh.
which is probably, you'd have to figure out an exemption. She might not be being able to.
They allow you to work and earn a certain amount of money if it's a family of 3. So she still get, well, I
Yeah.
don't know about the town, but on the link card.
Yeah, she could definitely get food stamps. She should be getting linked. Absolutely. She can also get a credit report. That's a not great segue into talking about how to get your credit report, okay? And why would somebody get a credit report? Well, the first one is identity theft. A really sad problem is that oftentimes an abusive partner will take out credit in someone's name without their knowledge, and they might not know. And so getting a credit report can give you some information about what's going on in your name. It can also help you make some strategic decisions when it comes to prioritizing debts, because based on the statute of limitations, you can make decisions on which debts to prioritize. And then also just, like I said, credit is very important in many ways. And while I said survival is more important than credit, and I will stand behind that statement until someone proves me otherwise, it is, if, let's say, you're someone like Lila, and right now all of your basic needs are being met, then you might also want to spend some time trying to take care of your credit health as well. Okay, so how? I think the number one best way is annualcreditreport.com, okay? There are 3 credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They have to give you a free credit report every year, each one of them. So you have 3 per year. This is the website to do it. There is one important asterisk to this. Oh, sorry. This is the important asterisk. If the abuser doesn't know the client's current address, but does know the Social Security number and her date of birth and other information about her, you want to be very careful about putting that new address into annualcreditreport.com, because if she can go get it, then so can he. So you can use the old address, okay? You can contact LAF, and we can sometimes get credit reports. You can talk to a local bank and see if they can pull a credit report for someone. But if that address is a safe address, you don't necessarily want to be putting it out online in this way, because then maybe he could go online and pull the credit report and see the new address. A lot of people use Credit Karma, and it's not bad. The only thing I don't love about Credit Karma is that they will try to sell you credit cards, okay? That's how they make their money. They provide you with these free credit reports, and in return, they tell you you're pre-approved for a lot of credit cards. Makes me feel very good about myself. So, if the person that you're working with already uses Credit Karma, that's great. But I don't generally tell my clients to go get Credit Karma, because I feel like there's no reason to inundate them with all these ads for credit at a time when they're feeling particularly financially vulnerable. Yes?
Is there another place you can get the actual score other than Credit Karma for free, since Annual Credit Report doesn't?
That's a good question. I don't know. If they already have a credit card, like Discover, I know will give them a score.
But a lot of my clients
Don't know. Yeah. I don't know the answer. That's a really good question. The only other thing I could think is maybe a bank.
You got it ran, then they can tell you?
Huh?
Like if you get it ran,
Yes. Yeah.
they can tell you
Yeah.
what it was.
Yeah. I have a great idea that I haven't put into practice yet, which is I think we should have a partnership with some banks to get safe credit reports. So if your organization wants to work on that with me, let me know. Cool soon.
And the other piece of that is that banks are obligated to spend down their community dollars. They have responsibility legally because of what happened during the recession. So they're looking for community partners. So if you have banks in close proximity to your agency, that's an approach we should be making and offering them the opportunity to spend down those dollars in partnership with our organization. So if Rachel is interested in that, I'm interested in that. There are a lot of folks doing interesting work on that locally and nationally, but that's a concrete tool I would need to contact your local bank and say, we need the following things, can you use your community dollars on this?
Yeah. Okay. So identity theft, you can find out what accounts are out there. You can dispute unrecognized accounts. You can dispute incorrect amounts. And identity theft is always a good referral to a consumer attorney, okay? It's not that you can't do it or that your client can't do it on their own. It's really just letter writing. But, if there is genuine identity theft going on, then I think it's always just worth a phone call to LAF or another legal services provider so that they can kind of help advise or represent them. Okay, prioritizing debts. So the other really great thing that a credit report does is that it gives you the date that the account is opened, and it gives you the date of the last payment. And that is how, in Illinois, the statute of limitations is calculated. The statute of limitations is how long a creditor has to sue on a particular debt. If you are past the statute of limitations, they can't sue you, and so that may be a reason to knock that debt down to super, super low on your list of priorities, okay? So, a credit card, the Illinois Appellate Court has decided that that is an unwritten contract, and so that is calculated 5 years from the date of the last payment. A written contract, like, I don't know, now I'm blanking. Something that you had a written contract for that's not a car note is 10 years from the date of last payment, maybe a title loan. And then contract for goods, which would be like a retail installment contract on a car, is 4 years from the date of last payment. There's a little bit of ambiguity about medical debts. It depends on whether or not like the patient signed a contract at the time that they went into the hospital for the treatment. If they didn't, there's very good arguments that it should be 5 years. If they did, it's probably 10. Okay, but that's one thing you can do. You get this credit report. It says on there, date of last payment, and you can say, oh, that was 7 years ago. This debt should be very, very low priority for you. However, if someone makes another payment, maybe they didn't make a payment for 5 or 6 months, or even a year, or even 2 years, but they make another payment, then that statute of limitations kicks in. And that's why the debt collectors are always very adamant. Like, I want a good faith payment. You can just pay $10 because that's going to keep the statute of limitations running. Okay, that's what they're trying to do with that tactic. You can also dispute old accounts. Okay, this will help your credit health. So there is federal law that says a negative account, and your credit report will be divided up into negative or adverse accounts and then all other accounts. A negative account can only stay on your credit report for 7 years after the date of last payment. After that, it should be taken off the credit report. They, I think, are getting better about this, but if you see it, then you can dispute it in a letter to the credit reporting agency. Judgments can stay on the credit report for 7 years after date of entry, and actually the law just changed on this, and I haven't changed my PowerPoint, I apologize, but it's my understanding that now civil judgments are not going to be on credit reports, so ignore that. And then bankruptcies can stay on the credit report for 10 years after the date of discharge or adjudication, which means if you had a Chapter 13, there's a date of filing, but then maybe they paid on it for a long time. So it's actually when that bankruptcy ended, not when the bankruptcy was filed. And then if, let's say there is an incorrect amount, okay, like for some reason that number is just wrong, you can also dispute that as an inaccuracy. And they have to do a reasonable investigation and report back to you within a particular period of time. And you just, you can do it through the website, although I would do it in writing, not in the website, because doing it through the website means that you sign on to a lot of arbitration agreements and stuff like that. So you can just do it in writing, a letter to the credit reporting agencies and say, I dispute this amount on my credit report. Here's a copy of my credit report, and please change this. All right, really, really quickly, I created a fake credit report, and that is also on your handout on the last page. Oh, you guys didn't get handouts?
No.
Uh-oh.
A bunch of extras back.
Here's
We are
extra.
not-
That's okay. Okay.
Different ones.
Yeah, there's two different ones. One has all of the takeaways. So a lot of the just facts about the law is on the takeaways sheet, and you can take that with you. And all mistakes are mine, not LAF's. Okay, so this is kind of what a credit report looks like. They have a lot more going on, but I tried to kind of recreate it. So we can look at this one. And with those facts in mind that we had, like negative accounts can only stay on for 7 years, or statute of limitations, we can kind of look at some things. So, for example, this TJ Maxx card, last payment was 2011. So can TJ Maxx or whatever debt buyer that they sell this account to sue her? No, right? Statute of limitations is 5 years. She made that payment, let's see if I can do math, 6 years ago. They can't sue her anymore. What about, I think I put one, Finger Hut. It's being cut off here. Down below. Last payment was December 2010. Can they sue her on that? No. And what else? It shouldn't be on there. She can dispute that. She can have that negative account taken off of her credit report, and that will help her credit score tick up. Okay? So like getting them and reading them can be like a little overwhelming, and I think also a lot of people that I work with, they don't really want to get their credit report, right? It's like a little scary to see it all out there. And I think having some good information about what the rules are when it comes to credit reports can be good. I like to tell people, look, information is power. If you have it, you know, and you can respond. And offering to review it with someone might make them feel like they're not alone when they're kind of faced with all of this information. Oh, I tried to circle things. What's her advice? Oh, I'm sorry. If she doesn't, let's say that she was a victim of identity theft and she has no idea about these accounts and he just used her social security number. One, you should definitely refer that to an attorney. But two, that is identity theft, and the credit reporting agencies have a duty to block that information. Okay, so she can make a police report. She can make a report with the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and she should send all of that to the credit reporting agencies, either Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, or all three, and say, this account is the product of identity theft. You must block it. Federal law requires you to block it. Okay? That was a lot of information, and it's the end of the day. Everybody's tired. So some takeaways: asset-based perspective. I think that you can use financial counseling and talking about money as a way to empower the person that you're working with and let them know what their choices are, even if they're feeling like, I don't have a lot of choices, but emphasizing that they do have choices and that they can understand what the consequences of those choices are, and then, maybe feel empowered to take the next step or to do it. I really believe that survival is more important than credit, and that you should always prioritize housing, food, utilities, secured debt, and then unsecured debt. And if that means letting some of those accounts go, understanding my credit health may take a tick down, but I can build that back up when I'm in a place where I'm more stable, when I have money, to put towards a regular monthly payment. And right now, being housed is just way, way more important than that. Information is power. Order a credit report and understand what's on there, and you can dispute fraudulent accounts and charges. And then unsecured debt can only be collected by voluntary payment or lawsuit, and lawsuits are expensive. I think another, generally a good referral to an attorney, a consumer attorney, is if they are being served with a summons to go to court. There may be some defenses to that. And oftentimes those lawsuits are filed by the debt buyers who don't actually have a lot of proof of the account, and so we usually have some good defenses against those cases. So I think that's always worth a referral to someone, because the judgments stick around. They're reported on your credit report, and it's just a good idea to get some understanding of what options you have if you're being sued. Yes.
How can we help our immigrant clients who are maybe faced with overseas debts but have been pursued here?
Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an answer.
I don't know. I mean, I would assume that they are subject to...
Are they subject to local laws here?
I would assume that they're subject to local laws here. They would have to enroll the judgment in Illinois and then seek to collect it through Illinois.
There. I mean, I think it would depend on what kind of debt. And when you say pursue, what does that mean? Does it mean that it's a multinational bank, for example, that they took a credit card out in another country, but they're trying to enforce something here? There's complicated jurisdictional issues when it comes to things that are across borders, period. Do you have more specificity about what the issue is?
I've been asked about it and I don't know the answers,
Yeah.
and I always just refer out, but
Yeah.
just to have like
Yeah.
a handout or something.
So one thing I know is like if they have a debt in another state, a judgment in another state, you know, they need to enroll that judgment in Illinois if they're going to try to use Illinois courts to pursue it. And I would assume the same is somewhat true for international debts if there's like a judgment in a different country. But I do think it really depends, and I don't know the answer with any more
And it really
specificity than
depends
that.
which country as well.
Yeah.
There's really complicated international law around which country. Sorry, Blair.
I was gonna ask Rachel to give us, do you have like a success story of yours for something you did in the last year, or just the way you've been using this?
Yeah, I do. I have 2 success stories that I'm really proud of. The first one is a client of mine who was basically kidnapped by an abusive boyfriend, and she tried to escape, and so basically he picked her up after work. They got in a car, they were driving, and she didn't think he was going to be driving, and then he starts asking her all these questions and threatening her, and starts just driving and goes past the exit to her house, past the exit to his house, is driving faster, she won't tell her where he's going, and she takes the wheel and she like maneuvers it to the right, and then he goes strongly to the left and then overcorrects, and the car crashes. She gets out of the car, she flees, she runs away. And the police come in. He tells the police that she caused the accident. She also gets arrested for very weird reasons to me that don't make sense. But then 2 years later, his insurance company sues her, saying that she caused the car crash. And we said, I don't think so. And we filed what's called a motion for summary judgment, and it was basically saying to this insurance company, no, when he is more at fault than she is, you cannot pursue her for these damages. Luckily, the insurance company's attorney realized that they did not want to touch this case, and it was dismissed with prejudice. I was really happy about that. Yay. And then something I spent a lot of time doing is foreclosure on marital homes, so like everything that Joanne was talking about at the end, trying to keep a marital home if the survivor wants to stay in it, especially if they're minor children, fighting for her to get on title, fighting for the bank to try to give her a modification and keep it stable. And I just signed a permanent modification, or my client just signed a permanent modification in one of those cases. So, yeah, those are my happy stories.